At 3 a.m. on the freezing morning of February 2nd, 1502, a piercing cry shattered the silence of the stone corridors within the Este castle. It wasn't a scream of terror, nor was it a cry of pain. It was something far more unsettling, a sound that made the guards lower their eyes and the diplomats exchange knowing, tense glances. They knew exactly what was happening behind the heavy oak doors of the ducal chamber. This wasn't a moment of private passion between newlyweds. It was the enactment of the most dangerous, secretive, and high-stakes ritual in Renaissance Europe. While the city of Ferrara slept under a blood-red winter moon, a 22-year-old woman was busy transforming her own body into a weapon of mass political destruction. What unfolded in that bedchamber wasn't just sex. It was warfare. Official documents locked away for nearly 5 centuries have finally surfaced to reveal the truth. The consummation of Lucrezia Borgia and Alfonso d'Este was a meticulously choreographed performance, observed by spies and recorded by chancellors as if it were a military treaty. In this world, a gasp was currency, and a stain on the sheets was worth more than a chest of gold. The fate of entire nations, the legitimacy of dynasties, and the balance of power in Italy all hung on the success of this single night. You might think you know the story of the Borgias: poison, incest, murder, but you have never heard this. You are about to uncover a protocol so secret and so explicit that history tried to bury it. But the truth has a way of screaming from the grave. Brace yourself, because what happened before dawn will shatter everything you thought you knew about the price of a crown. To understand why a duchess would agree to perform for an audience in her own bed, you have to understand the terrifying world she lived in. The year is 1502, and Italy is a shark tank. The Pope, Alexander VI, Lucrezia's father, has clawed his way to power, but his hold is slippery. He needs an alliance with the iron-willed Este family of Ferrara to secure his legacy. The price? His daughter Lucretia? But Lucrezia isn't a blushing virgin. She is a survivor of 2 disastrous marriages. One ended by a humiliating public divorce for impotence, the other by her husband being strangled in the Vatican. She knows that in this game, if you are not the player, you are the piece being sacrificed. Her new husband, Alfonso d'Este, is no soft courtier. He is a warrior prince who forges his own cannons and plays the viola with the same hands that strangle enemies. He radiates raw, pragmatic power, but power means nothing without legitimacy. The marriage contract stipulated a dowry of 100,000 gold ducats, enough to bankrupt a city, but the real clause was unwritten. The marriage had to be consummated, witnessed, and proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. If they failed in bed, the alliance would crumble and war would consume them both. The date was chosen with cynical precision. February 2nd, the feast of the purification of the Virgin. By aligning this carnal act with a holy day, the families were fusing the sacred and the profane, turning sex into a sacrament. But as the sun set and the candles were lit, the spies took their positions. Among them was the Chancellor of Isabella d'Este, Lucrezia's bitter rival, sent to watch, record, and report every move. The stage was set inside the ducal apartments, transformed into a theater of velvet and silver. Crimson curtains enclosed the bed, isolating the couple yet framing them for the invisible audience waiting in the shadows. When Alfonso entered, both he and Lucrezia knew their roles perfectly. This wasn't about romance, it was about survival. Lucrezia had learned the hard way that a woman's virtue was a myth, but her fertility was a weapon. If she could prove her husband's virility and her own receptiveness, she would become untouchable. The ritual began. It wasn't enough to do it once. The protocol demanded multiple confirmations to ensure there could be no legal loophole, no claim of incomplete union later on. And so, they proceeded. The first time was for duty, a tense navigation of bodies and expectations. But then something unexpected happened. Amidst the cold calculation of politics, a spark of genuine, raw attraction ignited between the warrior and the widow. They found a rhythm that defied the spies listening at the door. By the time they reached the third consummation, it was no longer just a performance. It was a conquest. Alfonso proved his endurance, silencing any whispers about the Este line's vitality. Lucrezia proved her allure, transforming from a political pawn into a queen of the night. The scribe outside scribbled furiously, documenting the success that would bind the Borgia and Este families together in blood and sweat. When dawn broke on February 3rd, the couple emerged not just as husband and wife, but as the architects of a new political reality. The meticulous notes recorded by the chancellor became a binding legal document, a certificate of dynastic legitimacy, more powerful than any army. Rivals who had prayed for the marriage to collapse, including the jealous Isabella d'Este, were left holding a report that detailed their own defeat. Lucrezia had done the impossible. She had turned the most vulnerable moment of her life into a shield of invincibility. Almost overnight, her status in the court changed. She was no longer the Pope's bastard daughter or the Black Widow. She was the Duchess who had tamed the cannon maker. Her survival was now tied directly to the survival of the dynasty, making her essential. Alfonso, too, emerged stronger, his reputation as a virile leader cemented. But while the court publicly celebrated, a silent war was exploding behind the scenes. Isabella d'Este, the First Lady of the Renaissance, realized she had been outplayed. She had sent a spy to gather dirt and instead received proof of her rival's triumph. Furious and threatened, Isabella began a campaign of psychological warfare, using rumors and subtle slights to undermine Lucrezia. But Lucrezia had learned a new trick in the bedroom. Intimacy is power, and she was about to aim that weapon at the one person Isabella couldn't control. Lucrezia didn't just stop at securing her husband, she set her sights on a bigger target to insulate herself from Isabella's attacks. She began a secret, passionate affair with Francesco Gonzaga, Isabella's own husband. It was a masterstroke of vengeance and strategy. By sleeping with her rival's husband, she wasn't just engaging in a tawdry affair, she was building a safety net of alliances. If the Este family turned on her, she would have the Marquis of Mantua in her pocket. Letters uncovered centuries later revealed the depth of this betrayal. Lucrezia and Francesco exchanged poetry and secrets, weaving a web of intimacy right under Isabella's nose. It was the ultimate power move. Lucrezia proved that in the Renaissance, a woman's influence wasn't limited to the man she married. It extended to any man she could captivate. She was rewriting the rules of the game, showing that while men fought with swords, women fought with secrets. This affair devastated Isabella. To lose political influence was one thing, but to lose her husband's attention to the woman she despised was a humiliation she couldn't bear. The rivalry between them became the stuff of legend, a Cold War fought with fashion, art, and lovers. But while they battled, Lucrezia continued to secure her primary fortress, her marriage. On September 5, 1502, tragedy struck. Lucrezia gave birth to a stillborn daughter and nearly died of childbed fever. In that era, a woman's value was often reduced to her womb, and a failure to produce an heir could be a death sentence. But because she had established such a strong, documented bond with Alfonso on that first night, and because she had proven her worth as a political partner, Alfonso didn't discard her. He stayed by her side, nursing her back to health. This was the payoff of the consummation protocol. It had forged a bond deeper than convenience. Lucrezia recovered, and she went on to bear legitimate heirs that cemented the Este Borgia line. She transformed from a pawn into a matriarch, a woman who commanded respect not because of who her father was, but because of who she had become. She governed Ferrara in Alfonso's absence, managed the economy, and patronized the arts, proving she was as capable in the council chamber as she was in the bedchamber. Her evolution is one of the most striking examples of female agency in history. She took the tools used to oppress her, marriage, sex, and childbirth, and turned them into the foundations of her power. She showed the world that a woman could be a mother, a lover, and a ruler all at once. The wedding night of 1502 remains a window into the brutal reality of the past. Strip away the paintings and the poetry, and you see the raw calculation of survival. unions forged for power, sex performed for witnesses, and love used as leverage. The Borgias and Estes didn't just marry, they merged corporations, and the merger was signed in sweat. This template spread across Europe. Queens like Catherine de' Medici and Anne Boleyn would later use similar tactics of erotic politics to control kings and reshape nations. They understood what Lucrezia had pioneered, that in a world ruled by men, a woman's greatest weapon was her ability to control the men who controlled the world. Lucrezia Borgia wasn't a villain, and she wasn't a victim. She was a master strategist who played a rigged game and won. Her story reminds us that history is often written by the men who watched, but it was made by the women who acted. As we close the book on this scandalous chapter, remember this: the archives of Europe are full of secrets like this, protocols buried because they revealed truths too uncomfortable for the official record. We think of the past as prudish, but it was far more explicit and transactional than we dare to imagine. The past still has secrets, and they are waiting in the dark for someone brave enough to find them. If this glimpse into the forbidden chambers of history made your heart race, then you are ready for what comes next. Subscribe to our channel because we are just getting started. Who is the historical figure you want us to expose next? Tell us in the comments. Until next time, remember that everything is a negotiation.